All right, here we are with part 3 of chapter 5. The last question we want to answer is, how feasible is it to use more renewable and non-renewable natural resources? So feasibility means how doable or how reasonable, how practical is it to develop more and more resources? So you might think that Canada, a country as large as Canada, would have plenty of natural resources, so we don't have to worry about taking care of them. But we've learned from our past mistakes that available natural resources do run out, and we are then forced to use more distant resources or poorer resources. So we don't want to get to this point. We want to make smart decisions so that we can make sure that as much as possible we can maintain our standard of living and be able to have a healthy economy, but also have a healthy economy for years and years to come and not just use up what resources we have. So many factors make a natural resource sustainable, including what's the total amount available. So if there's lots available, then as long as we make sure we use it well and wisely, then it should be sustainable. If there's not a lot there, then maybe we have to make sure we are using it wisely still, but perhaps looking into other options for what to use. How accessible is it? So is it easy to get to? Or do the transportation costs and production costs, are they just too high? How strong is the demand? So is this something that we can see a demand for in the future, or is it technology that's changing and won't necessarily need that resource in the future? Is the resource renewable, non-renewable, or a flow? Of course, if it's renewable, then that's a bonus because it means that we can grow more. If it's not renewable, then we have a bit more of a problem, perhaps, that we have to make sure we're using it slowly over time. What are the environmental and social impacts of using it? So maybe the money that can be made is a good amount and makes for a really healthy economy. But what if the social impacts are great? We have to remember that people are involved in these decisions and they are impacted. It's not just about making money. It should never just be about that. As Christians too, we have to make sure that we are keeping that in mind. So how about the example of fisheries? I'm sure you've talked about this in other classes as well throughout elementary school too. Canada has a past of learning lessons about fisheries and what sustainable use means. So the UN's, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO for short, estimates that 77% of fish species are already overfished or being harvested at their limit. So that's globally. While aquaculture, so fish farming, offers some opportunities for feeding the world's people, in the long term, it too has sustainability challenges. There's always going to be pros and cons to everything. And the pie chart shows exploitation levels. So it's the world's fish stocks. This isn't just Canada. But fully exploited means that there basically are not too many fish left at all. Overexploited, you can almost use the word used instead. Fully used, used up, or overused, or moderately used, or underused. So the point is that there are so many fish that have been well overused that we have to look at other options now. Talking about energy or fossil fuels is another example that's relevant to Canada. Canada has an estimated 10 billion tons of coal that can be commercially extracted right now, up to 80 billion tons that might be used in the future, which sounds good. It's a lot of resource. Unfortunately, coal is the dirtiest fossil fuel. So when it's burned, it gives off emissions that affect human health, the environment, and the economy. So if you're producing something that's actually creating more long-term impacts, negative impacts on people and the environment, then we have to think about what is more important and are there other options. So the last thing, and we'll look at energy a lot more in the coming days, I think, but for now, just an overview of different types of energy sources. If fossil fuels are becoming a problem, we want to try and look ahead and think about using different alternative energy sources, then what are the pros and cons? So there's 4 different types we'll go through. The map's important. It shows you what areas have the best energy resources and which ones wouldn't be suitable for that type. So for example, solar energy, it makes sense that those that are closer to the equator are going to get more solar energy, and so solar power would be an easier option for them than someone up north. So advantages, it's reliable, it's consistent supply. As long as it's sunny, then you have a supply. The sun isn't going to run out. Photovoltaic panels or solar panels are becoming more efficient, less expensive. Right now, still quite expensive, but technology is improving. It can be incorporated into the existing electric grid. So actually, and some people do this already, where you have solar panels on your house, and if you aren't using all the energy that's created, it goes back to the grid, and you can actually sell it back to the electricity company. It can be used on a very local scale as well. So you can just have a little solar panel on your property and use it right away. Disadvantages, the sun doesn't shine all the time. The sun is always there, but not all areas experience the same amount of sunlight. You'll notice in BC, even though lots of BC is fairly close to the equator compared to the north, we know that their climate means that they have tons of rain. And so lots of areas are actually not experiencing a lot of sun throughout the year. Solar energy is not uniformly delivered, so not everyone gets the same amount. It is a diffuse source that needs many collectors to generate enough power, so it's just not always as efficient as other types. Wind energy. So the redder it is, the better wind power is available. Of course, if you're on the coast, wind air masses coming off the oceans helps a lot. So the advantage, the price of wind generators is coming down. Again, technology increases, gets better. We get better at making things for less money. Can be incorporated into the existing grid again. Can be used on a very local scale again. But the wind doesn't blow consistently all the time. And it's, again, not uniformly delivered across Canada. That really goes for any type of energy source or resource at all. It's never uniformly available. It's a diffuse source, needs many turbines to generate enough power. Similar idea, you need lots of windmills or turbines to do any good. Tidal is using tides, using water. So it's reliable, consistent. Tides are more reliable in a lot of ways than wind and solar because the tides are always going to be there. Improved designs are making more sites possible. But the problem is right now there are few suitable sites. We see very few here. The more red or the bigger the circle, the more power is available, but really very limited sites. Generating stations are expensive, and building generation stations has environmental impacts. So you have to dig into the seabed, and that's going to affect the environment there. Last one is hydroelectric energy. We are very familiar with this. Even we call our electrical energy, we sometimes just summarize it as hydro, but that's actually hydroelectricity, and it's because we're using water. So the potential energy production is twice the size of current production. So we actually haven't really used it to its full potential. We could get a lot more energy out of it. It's reliable, consistent. Something like Niagara Falls, it's always going to be running, and it's highly efficient. Building power stations has environmental impacts. So building a dam, for example, there are impacts there to consider. Depends on extensive power grids, and development tends to focus on huge generating sites. So that's something that's pretty common for all the different energy sources. Okay, so to finish off here, besides doing the questions throughout the PowerPoints that will come up on Edpuzzle, that's how I'm setting it up this time, I'd like you to write these questions, the answers to them in your notes on another piece of paper. You don't need to hand them in. It's just a way of you going over all these notes again, which I will post as PDFs as well. Going over them, reviewing them, being able to summarize them properly to get the overall idea. Let me know if you have any questions.